Saat Farkı'ndan merhabalar. Her hafta farklı ülkelerden konuklar ağırlamaya ve gündemdeki konulara dair farklı perspektiflere yer vermeye, farklı seslere yer açmaya çalışıyoruz. Bu hafta çok kıymetli bir konuğum var Amerika'dan, New York'tan. Dünyaca ünlü Amerikalı ekonomist. 2 kez Time dergisinin en etkili 100 dünya lideri arasında gösterilen The Economist dergisi tarafından da yaşayan en etkili 3 ekonomist arasında sayılan Columbia Üniversitesi ekonomi profesörü, aynı zamanda Sürdürülebilir Kalkınma Merkezi'nin de direktörü Jeffrey Sachs bizlerle. Welcome, Professor. It's an honor for me to have you here on my show. Thank you very much. I appreciate your time.
Great pleasure. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Well, I will start with the pandemic, Professor. Of course, all countries are badly hit. Some are even worse. High inflation, rising prices, slowing growth rates are common global problems today. First of all, I want to ask, how do you see the overall performance of the governments and central banks? Did they manage it well? What were the common mistakes? Let's start with the US in particular, and then we will move on to Turkey.
Well, in general, our central banks and government have prevented this from turning into a complete economic collapse. That's a positive accomplishment, actually, because this was a very, very hard shock to the whole world. Where the bigger problem is that our governments were not very good at stopping the pandemic itself. In other words, I think the world economy has still functioned, not so great, but it still functions. But the capacity to stop the virus has been very small. And this is continuing to be a big problem, even with the vaccines. Of course, we have Delta, now we have Omicron. We still have an ongoing pandemic, ongoing disruption. That's where the weakness lies. We haven't stopped the pandemic itself. And until the pandemic is stopped, I'm afraid that the economic turmoil is going to continue.
So, Professor, are you optimistic or pessimistic for global economy returning to pre-pandemic levels in the near future?
Well, I'm not so optimistic because we still have a lack of global cooperation. We still don't have a real strategy for ending the pandemic. Each country is on its own. The system is pretty chaotic. There isn't global cooperation between the US, China, Europe, Russia, the major vaccine producing countries. We should have a lot more global cooperation and give a lot more confidence to the world. Instead, we're in not only the battle against the pandemic, but unfortunately, a lot of geopolitical tension as well. And that means that cooperation is low, and it means we're not getting back to normal.
Yeah, I will, come back to that global cooperation issue in particular, but first I want to talk about Turkey and Turkish economy, Professor. You know, it's been struggling with rapid devaluation of Turkish lira and rising inflation. And there is this highly debated policy of keeping interest rates low. And with the new economic model, we are pushing back the policy of attracting money with high interest rates. We are supporting production and exports with low interests, President Erdogan says. So what do you think of this economic model? It can work out, you think? Raising interest rates can help the economy in any way? What would you recommend?
Turkey is in a very difficult situation and has been in a difficult situation since 2016, actually. You know, that failed coup attempt. Turkey's credit rating was downgraded to below investment grade by these rating agencies. They have a big impact because when Turkey lost the investment grade rating, things started to become worse. Interest rates rose, capital left the country, Turkey couldn't attract investments the same way. And so I see what's happening now as continuing process that really started 5 years ago with greater difficulty. Turkey never regained investment grade. And then, of course, tensions between Turkey and the EU, tensions in the region, in Turkey's region, Western Asia, all made things more difficult. And since these credit ratings are political to some extent, that made things worse. Then came the pandemic. So Turkey's been hit by several shocks in the last 5 years that have led to the current situation. You know, raising interest rates will attract capital, it will keep the currency stronger, and it will be very difficult for the economy. This low interest rate strategy has big risks of higher inflation. The bigger problem is that we really need to see Turkey with good relations in geopolitics, because if the relations are not good geopolitically, the financial difficulties are very great. And this is what Turkey is suffering right now. There is no good answer to Turkey's situation. I don't like this credit rating business, by the way. I think that it is very damaging to countries like Turkey because it doesn't give a forward perspective. But what we need is for Turkey to be working with the European Union, to be working cooperatively with China, with Russia, with other countries to say, here's our perspective in the future. This is why we are creditworthy. This is our growth prospect and our investment prospect. And all choices would then look better. You know, making it a technical question of central bank decisions means you're already in a very bad situation. And the current policy is very risky because of inflation and collapsing currency, for sure. The high interest rate policy is no savior. What is needed is a future-oriented path for economic development of Turkey. And that's, unfortunately, you know, not just technical economics, that's also geopolitics.
I see. So it is more like political, not only economic. The problem is Turkey's relations with the West, with the US also, by the way. You know that there are always there is always this issue of sanctions from the US over the, recent buy of S-400s from Russia, etc. And there are some other issues that we have with the United States. So these are also contributing to the problems.
Yes, these sanctions policies are very ill-advised by the United States in general. I don't like America's unilateral sanctions because they create massive problems for other countries, massive problems for Turkey in this case. And they're not right. This is not the way to approach questions like this one. The way to approach questions like US-Turkish relations is not by unilateral actions that punish another country, but by negotiation, cooperation, understanding that makes a lot more sense. And unfortunately, the US sanctions are doing damage not only to Turkey, but to a lot of other countries around the world as well. I'm against them, and I speak out against them often.
Mm-hmm. Now I will come to this topic then. This Professor, Western-centric world, where the United States has been the dominant power, it's changing. Many believe that we are heading towards a post-US world. And it's being assumed that the US influence or presence in specific regions, particularly the Middle East, will decrease. And I think Afghanistan was a recent show or a good example of this. On the other hand, China is rising. So I was wondering your take on this new world order. What kind of changes, benefits, or threats it will bring to the global system?
Potentially, it could bring a lot of benefits because we should not want a world dominated by one country. I don't think it's a good idea to have what political scientists call a hegemonic power or one dominant power in the world. We should have a multipolar world. The problem is we don't want a multipolar world filled with conflicts between the major powers. We want a multipolar world that is based on the rule of law, the UN Charter, and the realization that cooperation is the only way forward for human well-being. So when the United States tries to raise tensions, and it does with China, for example, or it says to Turkey, you either choose us or you choose them, this is not the kind of multilateral order that we want. Consider China's Belt and Road Initiative, for example, which is a strategy to help build infrastructure in Eurasia. The United States hates that program. It says, don't join that with China. But actually for Turkey, the idea of China's Belt and Road and a European Union program called the Global Gateway and Turkey's idea of the Middle Corridor all make sense. It would put Turkey in a good position as its geographic role as a bridge between Europe and Asia. So we should be looking for cooperative approaches and cooperative investment. We should be in a post-US world, not in the sense that the US should sink or disappear. Quite the contrary. The US should be a constructive participant and partner with the European Union, with Western Asia, with China, and so forth. But there's also another aspect of geopolitics, which is that the US role in the Middle East, in my view, was highly destructive. It was destructive in Iraq. It was destructive in Syria. It was destructive in Afghanistan. It was destructive of Iran. But many countries in the region, in your region, look to the US and, oh, come save us. We don't like our neighbor. And so the big powers were brought in at the interests of individual countries that increase the divisions and the tensions within the region. Another principle, I think, of good economics and life is there should be cooperation within a regional level as well as globally. So we need to end these incessant wars in the Eastern Mediterranean and the Middle East, end the war in Yemen. I'm glad the United States is out of Afghanistan. We should end the war in Syria. We should be actually ending the divisions between Iran and neighboring countries. Because if the region would work together, it wouldn't need or ask the superpowers, whether it's the US or Russia or anyone else, come in and intervene on our side. That's quite destructive. Actually, Western Asia could be an extremely strong, peaceful, and crucial region in the world, but only if it cooperates internally, not seeking a superpower to battle another superpower in another kind of proxy war. There have been too many of them. The United States played into too many of them, created disaster. Of course, this goes back a long time in our history. This is a very contested region throughout history. But I think the case for peaceful economic development cooperation is stronger than ever.
Professor, you also touched upon, but I want to talk a bit more about this competition, or how to call it, maybe a Cold War between United States and China. And China has been regarded as a national security threat for the US, according to many reports. You think this is an exaggerated threat in Washington, D.C.?
Attitude towards China is very badly informed, misinformed, and based also on grandiose ideas of US power. So US policymakers want to have a US dominant world. American political leaders believe the United States should run the world. It's a ridiculous idea, especially since American policymakers understand so little of the rest of the world. And we have so many problems in the United States, by the way, that we should be devoting our own energies to building the United States, not trying to run the world. So the attitude towards China is mainly a rejection of China's successful economic development. But I view China's successful economic development in a different way, not as a threat to the world, but as a great accomplishment, because China went from poverty to development in 2 generations, from 1980 to this year. This is a remarkable achievement. It's good for the Chinese people, and it is good for the world if we view it in the proper way, because China can help the rest of the world to build and to develop, to modernize infrastructure, to raise economic life, to add new technologies that can provide solutions. But the American mindset is it's us or them. Either we're in charge or they're in charge. This is silly. Nobody should be in charge. So I'm against the US government or political approach that views China in such a danger, as such a danger. The fact of the matter is the US has 800 military bases around the world. China has 1 outside of China. The United States has been engaged in nonstop wars for the last 40 years, many in the Eastern Mediterranean and the Middle East, unfortunately for everybody. And the result, from my point of view, is China is not the aggressive power in the world. China is a country trying to achieve economic development. The United States has this idea of a militarized world. I don't like it. I don't think we need it. We need to devote our resources to peaceful, sustainable development, to fighting against climate change, fighting against pollution, fighting against water scarcity, fighting against hunger. But the United States Congress just passed yesterday, the House of Representatives, a military budget of almost $800 billion. That's not security. That's a misdirection of funds.
Yeah, and by the way, this recent democracy summit was also very, controversial, especially here in Turkey, because many countries which are not very bright, obviously, about democracy, but Hungary, for example, was not invited, Turkey was not invited, while countries such as Angola, Iraq, they were invited, so it created some debate. So what do you think about this perception of democracy or the future of democracy in the US also? There is a kind of threat or risk to the future of democracy?
Well, democracy in the US is under threat, but internally, not from outside, internally. The United States had Donald Trump as president. He was one of the worst presidents, maybe the worst president in American history, a nasty man, a corrupt man, a man who didn't believe in democracy himself, who wanted to cheat in any way he could to stay in power. So yes, democracy is under threat, but the way the US is pursuing this issue by dividing the world, okay, this half is democratic, this half isn't, that's not a solution. The solution is to strengthen our own democratic institutions and traditions. If the U.S. wants to have influence, it should have influence by example, not by dictation or dividing the world according to America's somehow report card, which is a pretty arbitrary one. So I'm not happy about this meeting. I think it was ill-advised. I'm rather situation within the United States because we're a very divided country, divided in so many ways, divided geographically, divided by income level, divided by economic class, divided by ideology. And that's our biggest threat, actually, is our internal divisions, not China or some external threat.
Mm-hmm. Professor, we have very little time left, but I want to ask your opinion about this also green transformation, climate change, transition to renewable energy issues, because these are among the most important issues globally today, as you also touched upon. And you are also the director of the Center for Sustainable Development at Columbia University. So I wonder, because there are also people who argue that rich world is telling the global south to stay poor and stop developing. and rich countries' climate policies are even regarded as colonialism in green. What is your take on this? Do you think this fight against climate change is another burden on developing countries, further widening inequality?
You know, the climate change issue is really serious for the whole world, very serious for Turkey, because the Eastern Mediterranean region can suffer a massive rise of temperature and a massive water crisis in the future, much more drought, for example, because of climate change. And I'm very concerned about the complications that are coming already from the climate change: forest fires, droughts, extreme storms, rising sea level, heat waves, and there's going to be a lot more to come. So this is not some gimmick or some imposition. Now, the rich countries should be doing more to help the rest of the world finance the fight against climate change, but we shouldn't slow down the fight. We should speed it up because this is so urgent. And we should recognize, for example, in the Eastern Mediterranean, there are actually huge potentials for wind power, for solar power, and for hydropower if we don't have a climate disaster. You put the three together, the Western Asian region could become a major powerhouse of renewable energy. But one of the big problems is there isn't an integrated strategy. Europe has a very good idea, the European Green Deal, but I think Turkey needs a Turkish Green Deal and a Western Asian Green Deal that is harmonized with Europe, not something in competition, but something that is interconnected in a sensible way. And so this is, again, where cooperation comes in. You can't fight climate change one country at a time. We have to fight it in a cooperative manner. We shouldn't forget how dangerous the current trajectory is of warming. So we should take this on, but the rich countries should pay more, and we should do this in a cooperative way so that Turkey, for example, says, yes, here is our energy future, but it's interconnected with Europe's energy future. It's interconnected with China's energy future. It's interconnected with North African energy future. We need to see those interconnections in real plans and real strategies. No single country can do that on its own.
Mm-hmm. Well, unfortunately, time is up, Professor. Thank you very much for your time. I really appreciate, and hopefully, when you visit Turkey next time, we will have a cup of coffee or Turkish tea, and we will continue.
Wonderful. Well, I'm planning to be in Istanbul early in 2022, so I look forward to that.
Perfect. And I will be waiting for you, Professor. Thank you very much. Evet, saat farkını böylelikle noktalamış olduk. Dünyaca ünlü Amerikalı ekonomist, Kolombiya Üniversitesi'nden ekonomi profesörü Jeffrey Sachs bizlerleydi. Türkiye ekonomisini, küresel ölçekte yaşanan ekonomik sorunları, iklim değişikliğini ve pek çok konuyu konuştuk. Önümüzdeki hafta tekrar farklı bir konukla görüşmek dileğiyle. Hoşça kalın.